Hi friends, welcome to Houseplant Tips and Tricks. My name is Nick and today we're going to talk about caring for Sansevierias. This series is sponsored by repotme.com. Get all of your indoor gardening supplies delivered to your door from one place. Repotme.com has practically everything you need for your orchids, succulents, and houseplants, including handmade potting mixes, planters, fertilizers, and much more. Sanseverias technically belong to the Dracaena genus as of recently, but for the sake of ease, we're going to refer to them as their former scientific name, Sanseveria, or by their common name, snake plant, throughout this video. They're pretty easy to care for and are often recommended to beginner indoor gardeners because they tolerate poor care, neglect very well, but there is so much more to these plants than just that. You can see with the plants that I have on display on the table today just how diverse the Sanseveria group is. Of course, there are more similarities than differences when it comes to this particular genus of plants. However, those nuanced differences between species are what keeps things so exciting. At least for me. First and foremost, let's discuss the lighting requirements for Sanseverias, as in my opinion, this is the most misunderstood element of their care. If you go online and you look up a list of low-light houseplants, there is no doubt that snake plants are going to be at the top of that list, and that's because they tolerate low-light conditions extremely well. The key word here is tolerate. They will survive in low light, but that's about it. They won't grow, they won't thrive, but they will survive. If you want to see vivid growth in your snake plants, you're going to have to place them somewhere where light is ample, like a bright windowsill or directly underneath a grow light. Bright light will ensure that these succulent leaves grow in adequately. If a snake plant puts off a leaf in too low of light, that leaf is going to be wimpy and stick thin in comparison to the rest of the plant that had grown in the correct light conditions back in the nursery where it was grown. This is actually something that took me a long time to learn. Whenever I would bring a snake plant home, I would just place it wherever I wanted in my home, wherever I thought it looked good, because I knew that it's going to survive wherever I put it and look the same at the very least. It wasn't until last year when I had moved some of the varieties that I had dancing around the dark corners of my home into a bright windowsill, and that's when I started to see these plants grow like exponentially, which is something I didn't think snake plants could actually do. Some of my snake plants were pencil thin in those situations. This Sanseveria variety that I have over here in particular was one of those, but then once I moved it into the windowsill, they started plumping up like no other, and these leaves became very, very succulent, and the plant just looks completely different than it did prior to me putting it in the windowsill. So a very big learning lesson for me. Sanseverias require so much more light than I originally thought. And ever since learning that, I always try to push my Sansies as close to the window as possible. Unlike most houseplants, snake plants are going to love being subject to the bright light of like an east or west or possibly even a south-facing window. Even a north-facing window is going to prove to be much better than the dead center of the room or a dark corner. Just do be mindful if you are moving a Sanseveria from a lower light area of the home over to a brightly lit window or underneath a grow light, you might want to ease it into that situation. A quick change into light that is way too bright could possibly scorch or burn the leaves if it happens very quickly, but if it's eased in that situation, it's probably going to handle that light very, very well. So if you are making a transition like that, perhaps put a sheer curtain in front of the window to keep your plant out of the direct sun at first, or just put it like 2 or 3 feet away from that bright window to kind of ease it into that lighting situation. Always better safe than sorry. All that being said, these are still very architectural plants in their appearance, and they will have a very large effect on your home aesthetically when styled in the home. So if you do have a dark corner in your space and you really want to put a plant in there, a snake plant is still a perfect plant to put there. Will it grow beautifully? Absolutely not, but it should look basically exactly the same as it did when you purchased it at the nursery, possibly even a year down the line. And that's hopefully good enough. Let's discuss the watering requirements for Sanseverias next. As very succulent houseplants, you could surmise that these plants are storing a lot of water, particularly in their leaves. So this translates as a plant that is going to be very drought tolerant and would probably prefer its soil to be on the drier side. And that is true to an extent. Snake plants in darker situations, just like the large plant that I have on the floor behind me, are going to be watered minimally. Since they won't be actively growing due to the lack of light, we can be decently hands-off with these particular plants. They still need to be watered though. I say that because I can't tell you how many friends I have that looked up plants online and saw that snake plants are low light and drought tolerant houseplants, so they brought them home and haven't done anything to them, and in my opinion, these plants are garbage. Perhaps my friends' hearts when it comes to plants are a little bit larger than mine, so they still hold on to them. But some people just take the phrase drought tolerant a little too seriously, in my opinion. So yes, even in the darkest of conditions, snake plants are still going to want a good drink like at least every 2 or 3 weeks minimum. In brighter light conditions, however, they can be quite thirsty. I've been shocked sometimes to have to water my Sanseverias like every 3 or 4 days during the growing season, specifically when they are growing actively in bright light conditions and they're absorbing the water just so fast, like way quicker than I can comprehend. Of course, there are other factors beyond just the amount of light that's going to affect how quickly your plant processes water. So for example, a huge one is the planter material. So unglazed ceramic or terracotta planters are porous, so they're going to pull moisture out from the soil inside the planter, versus glazed ceramic or plastic or metal. These are non-porous materials, so that moisture is going to stay put. So these are going to dry out much faster than these. Also, the planter size, of course, a larger planter is going to have more volume, so there's more water to process versus a smaller planter. That kind of goes without saying. And the soil consistency, whatever the soil is made up of, can also affect how quickly the plant processes water. So there are a lot of things to keep in mind there. If you're not watering your snake plants enough, they will do a decently good job at telling you with their foliage. So their leaves will kind of shrivel and wrinkle up a little bit. And if you notice it and you catch it in time, go ahead and give the plant a good drink. It's going to plump right back up good as new, just as it was a couple days ago. However, if it's been a few weeks and you've really been neglecting your snake plants, there is still the possibility that it's going to plump back up and come back to looking as it did before, but it's just going to take a couple of waterings and probably a few weeks. So just be a little bit more on top of it and water the plant right when it's dry. And within a few waterings, if it hasn't been too far gone, it should start to plump back up. Might take some time, but it should look good as new within a matter of time. And obviously, as you can see here on the table, Sanseverias come in so many different varieties, particularly in succulents. So there's some really succulent varieties like this starfish one and this baseball bat one right here, but there's also some thinner varieties like this standard trifasciata, and one I don't have on screen, the Sanseveria parva, is also very thin. These thinner varieties are going to want to be watered less often than the thicker varieties, as these are storing a lot more water in their leaves. So during the growing season in bright light conditions, I'm probably going to be watering this variety right here like every 5 to 7 days. Well, this one over here, I would probably be watering every 7 to 10 days, maybe pushing like every 14 days or 2 weeks. So just assess the foliage, but it's pretty obvious when you have these really absurdly thick Sanseverias versus these pretty standard ones that are just like not even 1/8 of an inch thick in their foliage. Soil mixture is another really important element to consider when caring for snake plants. As succulents, these plants are going to prefer a well-draining soil mix to help ward off any excess moisture, as if these are sitting in wetness for too long, from how thick they are, you can probably tell that they would rot pretty easily. And it's not going to be pretty if they do. I would recommend using a soil mix that's geared towards cacti and succulents, as of course that's going to be designed with drought-tolerant plants in mind. The mix that I use is the Cactus and Succulent Classic Mix from repotme.com. I will leave this link in the description below. And if you click through any of the links that I have in the description and you make any purchases, I will earn commissions, so you can support a creator while also purchasing stuff that you probably already need. And you can use code NICK to save 10% on any potting mix from repotme.com. For most varieties of snake plants, this soil mix is going to work perfectly right from the bag. There's a really good amount of perlite and pumice already mixed into this mixture, as well as some small stones, and that's all exactly what a Sanseveria is looking for in its soil mixture. But if we're working with some of these thicker varieties, like the starfish one or the baseball bat one over there, we might consider adding some extra pumice or perlite into the mixture, as well as some horticultural charcoal, especially if we're working with a glazed ceramic planter, as that horticultural charcoal is going to help keep things clean, which is really going to help out these succulent varieties if they're just sitting in the tad bit of excess moisture. That's just going to help keep things as clean as possible and hopefully not put these guys over the edge towards rot. You could even consider adding some sand into your soil mixture if that's what you have on hand, as these are often growing in some sandy soil mixtures in their natural habitat, so that would absolutely help and not hurt whatsoever. But anything to keep the soil nice and gritty and coarse, that is exactly what these Sanseveria plants are looking for. And if you just have a couple of snake plants to around your home, or maybe if keeping a bunch of soil amendments like perlite, pumice, and charcoal isn't really up your alley, which by the way, all of those soil amendments are also available on repotme.com, and I will leave those linked in my description below as well. Repotme.com has a snake plant Imperial potting mix all ready to go right from the bag with everything your Sanseverias need to keep them as happy and healthy as can be. As long as you're using a well-draining soil mix, you should be in the clear, but this is especially true for any snake plants you have growing in true low light conditions. They're also really easy to propagate. There are a couple of different methods that you can do to go about it, but the most tried and true, I would say, is by division. I have another episode of Houseplant Tips and Tricks that is all about propagating by division, but essentially you are just separating a baby plant from the mother plant and potting that by itself, and basically just starting the whole process over again. I think it's a very rewarding process, and it's also a perfect and easy way to share these incredible houseplants with friends and family. You can also propagate these by cutting up their leaves into pieces, which is a method that I've never found success with, so I'm not the one to ask. Just know you technically can. Just to tie up a few loose ends when it comes to Sanseveria care, humidity, you don't have to worry about the humidity whatsoever. These plants can be grown in high humidity, low humidity, and I don't think they would show any signs of stress in any type of humidity whatsoever, so don't worry about that. And temperature-wise, these are extremely easygoing. They can handle like as low as like 50 degrees Fahrenheit, so you don't have to worry about any drafty windows in the wintertime, which is amazing. And in the summertime, they can also handle some pretty high heat. They can handle upwards to like at least 90 degrees Fahrenheit, if not 100 degrees. So also a plant that you could consider putting outside in the summertime if that floats your boat. But honestly, this is just like the perfect indoor houseplant, especially if you have like a minimalist aesthetic or even a maximalist. There's tons of snake plants in existence. Just get one of each variety and just put them everywhere in your home, and you know they're going to look exactly as they did when you bought it, at least for a period of time. If you have a snake plant for 6 years in the same spot, of course it's going to try to put off some new growth at some point, and some of those older leaves might die off, but within the first year, they're gonna look exactly the same. I can guarantee you that. Truly a very easy plant to grow, perfect for beginner indoor gardeners. It's just mildly misunderstood at some points of its care. But that's just what I was here to over-explain today. Thank you to repotme.com for sponsoring this series. It's always a pleasure making these videos. As I mentioned, I will leave any of the products I talked about from repotme.com a link to my description below. If you click through any of those links and make any purchases, I will earn some commission, so thank you in advance, and you can use code NICK to save 10% on any potting mix from repotme.com. So thank you so much for joining me today. If you don't already, you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at phillyfoliage. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, please. And I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.